G'day and welcome to SPCs Unleashed. This week we are here and it's beautiful. We're all here. Ali is, my goodness, 2 weeks in a row, Ali. What is going on with that?
Oh, yes. I
Uh,
don't know.
we're going to talk about distributed PI planning. And, devoting a whole episode to it really happens because when we talked about PI planning late last year, we had like one little question that came up with about 4 minutes to go about distributed PI planning, and everybody was like, nah, it's a whole episode. So we're going to do a whole episode on distributed PI planning. And as always, we're going to start with true passions in the space. Ali, why don't you take us away?
Sir, yes, sir, absolutely, sir. This it's I think this episode is going to become a very practical one, which is just one containing tips and tricks that are easily copy and pastable. Especially for me, um, I have a little bit of a weird view and hence a weird passion on this topic. I have really, really good experience on totally over engineering and overdoing PI plannings, or let me rephrase it, remote PI plannings. Things, this session would go so smooth. Everyone knows exactly what to do. Is actually even pulled in calls rather than people have to join calls. It just, I have a weird stance on this, but I think once executed well, that's it. It becomes the standard, which is horrible because every other session needs to be running as smooth.
All right,
But it's my passion.
So the hardware guy wants to over-engineer things.
Oh yes.
Stephan, what about the sports and military guy?
Yeah, one needs a good challenge, or as Richard Rummelt coined the term, a crux, right? And if you have a challenge and the crux, you need to find feasible approaches and practices. So let's talk about challenges and the crux of it, distributed PI planning.
And Niko?
Yeah, most of us have a pre-save life, and me too. I was a developer, and I really hated remote. I was one of the first developers having nearshoring and offshoring stuff, and it was always so difficult. And meanwhile, I'm happy working remote and having remote PI plannings. So make them great is some kind of my passion for the people in the States. You know this, know again or again. So just make them great. The PI plannings remote. And for that, I think you must master the tools. So I'm thankful for COVID. Oh no, go ahead. Cut this. No, because of COVID, the tools also progressed. So it's much more easier. So master the tools is one thing. And the other thing is a people thing. So know how people, human function, how they are. So, and both are my passions. So using tools, using them well, and know what people need to stay focused and stay happy and stay engaged.
All right, so let's get into war stories. And I thought a great place to start would be thinking about first PI planning. And I remember my first distributed PI planning, right? And I've done, I think I stopped counting at about 200 PI plannings that I'd helped with. But it was quite a few years ago now that the first time we tackled a distributed PI planning, and it was 2 cities, both in Australia, half an hour time zone gap. And let me just say that, I may have done more than 200 PI plannings. I've only ever had 2 that failed. And the first time I tried a distributed one was one of the ones that failed. And, it was like, to be truthful, they probably shouldn't have been in the room for PI planning anyway. There were so many things that were missing in terms of preparation. But the moment where you realize that, half the people had flown into the wrong state, and the people who needed to be talking to some teams had flown into a different city, the people who should be talking, like the subject matter experts, had flown into the wrong cities, you name it. And the whole thing fell apart, and we basically wound up cancelling it after the first day because the teams had nothing to do on the second day. And, that
They
would have been
flew into the wrong city?
Yeah, literally, because what we had was they'd gone, we're not going to put everybody
Wow.
in one city. But we had people from, Brisbane, from Sydney, and they'd gone, look, we'll just settle on 2 cities and either fly to Melbourne or to Sydney. And they'd kind of left it up to people which one they felt they wanted to go to.
Wow.
They'd literally gone to the wrong
Wow.
places. And it was one of those things, I've been through, and I'm sure you've all been through, chaotic PI plannings. But the magic is that, you've got everybody there and you find your way through the chaos in the moment, and magical stuff happened. And I think we probably could have saved that one if we'd all been in the one place, as opposed to in crisis, spread across 2 places, struggling to keep them synchronized. So that was my first experience with distributed PI planning. What about you, Niko?
It was the greatest horror I've ever had. So somebody asked me, "Oh, Niko, is COVID?" And this time everybody was at home, so not having satellites in different location. Everybody was home, and they realized, I think a week before, oh gosh, I think we need support, because if I'm alone as an RT having 10 teams, that could be difficult. Yes, that could be difficult. Not only could be, it will be difficult. So they asked me if I can handle 3 teams as a coach for the Scrum Masters. And I didn't ask so much because I thought they will be prepared, because I had so many community of practices talking about how to make it better. This whole how do you call it, dispersed PI, maybe, where everybody is somewhere else. And then I arrived there and I've seen, oh gosh, they are not allowed to use cool tools. They had really Confluence, just Confluence, nothing else. So, okay, it's handleable. Okay, how do you handle breakout rooms? Oh, we have for each breakout room a separate meeting, because the tool they had wasn't able to make breakout rooms. So, okay, so now I have 4 links, the main loom, the 3 teams, and I have to jump around with a 1-minute delay in between. So yeah, that's okay. So I was sitting there having no clue where people are. The agenda was some kind of, it was there, but you hadn't the feeling of, like Mark, you said, if you are in the same room, RTs have the skill to see the room, even if it's somewhere on the side. You don't need only like good teacher. Good teacher realize what happens in the whole room, not only what happens in front of them. And I felt completely blind, or with one eye. I only was able to see one thing. And the hard thing was when I tried to find my teams, they weren't there. So I called in and so, okay, nobody's there. Then I start chatting, where are you? Oh, we have a client meeting. And nobody realized that. Okay, so I went to the next team. So yeah, we finished earlier. So what? So I was there just jumping around. Nobody were there. No idea how to find them. So it was really great horror. And that's why I said in the beginning, you must master the tools. And yeah, if you are a bank or an insurance and you love security, yeah, okay, then you will have horror PI plannings, because some tools are not so good like the others. So horror, Mark, horror.
Okay, so that's 2
Oh,
bad
wow.
first ones. Is somebody going to lift us out of this?
Let me try. Let me try, Mark. I would label my first real big distributed PI planning blood, sweat, and tears.
Oh, happiness.
No, that comes after. I remember March 13th, 2020. You need a crisis to get better. COVID struck us. I was at Porsche in Stuttgart. We were preparing kind of a large solution with 5 trains in parallel, some smaller ones, 2 bigger ones. And comes March 13th, they closed down the factories. They closed down the offices. We had to go home. And we were in full swing preparing the PI plannings that should take place end of March. Chaos. We said, okay, we have to postpone. And now my DNA kicked in, the engineering DNA kicked in, and we said, between me and the coaches and the RTs, no way, we will have a PI planning. Let's switch. And everything you mentioned, Mark and Niko, we had to talk about communication channels, about tools. They had MS Teams, but it was not up to the standard, right? The sheer mass of people, it couldn't handle it. We talked about how can we set up something that is an information radiator for everyone, not only in a train, but over those 5 trains. So we had to talk about Miro, mural, stuff like that. And I was really lucky I had a team of RTs and coaches who were really dedicated. And I have to point out one guy, Holger. He took the lead. So he was caring about Miro was up and running. We had all those channels. We had several channels for the teams, several channels for each train. We had an overall channel. We had channels for each individual business owner. So I wish I could show you this Miro board. I still have it, but due to an NDA, I can't show you. This is really my pride. I had a team who had some blood, sweat, and tears for 4 weeks. And comes April, we had that PI planning. And as you said, Mark, that wasn't my work. It was the work of the whole team and everyone who participated. In the end of that PI planning, which was distributed also over time zones with people in India, people in the US, we received accolades from the COO of Porsche Digital, who said, I never ever had such a transparency. Thank you very much. If you do it right, if you have the right people, and if you have, and I'm with you, Ali, if you have some nerds and lots of engineering DNA, it really works on the tool side.
Oh yeah, and it just spending a little bit more time, actually a lot more time in the preparation. It just really works. I think for remote PI plannings, you just have to, especially in the beginning, whenever it's the first time, because I think if I could share one of my first distributed PI plannings. I'm not going to talk about one that was sort of distributed in terms of locations where we could still come together, because I had that one before. But no, I'm going to zoom in onto indeed one of those PI plannings that happened in April 2022. What am I saying? April 2020. We were in a very similar / same situation. Art launch. A pretty big train, actually, about 160 people or so in it, using sort of a pressure cooker effect. So, everyone was trained. We, preparing backlogs, the whole shebang. And then all of a sudden, by company decree, we're all going to work from home for good reasons, as you all understand. We were flipping out, obviously. It was like pure panic. But pure panic while having our senior leadership around the train stating, you know what? We need the structure to keep in touch with each other. So we're just going to continue. We're just going to do it remotely. Fun fact, the people were using Skype at the time. The sort of migration to Microsoft Teams still had to happen. Office 365 was just sort of rolling out slowly within this company. Jira was completely new. Everyone got a Jira account, so they used Jira for obvious reasons. Got a Jira account, but then, there are a few people involved in preparing backlogs. So for them, that was very, very new. And there are all kinds of tools that we've introduced just to make, let's say, make BI planning remotely work. But people were not used to the tools. So the thing is, with a couple of people and one specific colleague as well, I'm going to plug him as well, Rick de Groot. We just spent days and nights preparing everything. And so we created huge manuals that were dynamic, had click-through links, so that by in every session that we were in, there were all kind of click-through links to the right Jira page, to the right whatever, let's say, folder in Microsoft Teams. The same thing as you mentioned, Stephan. Teams had their own channel. We had agreements on how to reach out to teams. We had templates on how to mention sort of a dependency with another team, so that we didn't forget. It's just like writing post-its. Whenever anyone write post-its, they typically write like 1 or 2 words, super unclear. Nobody has an idea of what we're trying to write down. But the same thing with dependencies. It's you need to write down, I, from this team, need to have this kind of a deliverable at this kind of time from this kind of team. Would that be possible? So that people would understand directly how to respond and what to respond on. But we've really over-engineered it, and it went smooth. It went so smooth. I'm just still thinking about it. I'm like, of course, there are always quarrels, but from the process side, that PI planning went just flawless. And people could just spend their time and their brain power thinking and talking about, the content, rather than trying to figure out, oh, what do I need to do at the moment? Do I need to be in this call or in that call? It was fantastic.
Right, so moving along from, first experience, and boy, we've all been through it a few times since then. For our weekly jiggle this week, Niko took us to new and strange places. It's no longer cartoon characters and Star Wars characters. Our jiggle for the week was, if distributed PI planning was a cologne or fragrance, tell me more. And that was a really interesting one for me, because I'm suddenly asking ChatGPT for perfumes and colognes that give you the concept of blood, sweat, and tears as the thing they evoke. And imagine a perfume for blood, sweat, and tears. But I got a surprisingly long list. So I wound up with Ombre Leather by Tom Ford, which is described as evoking a well-worn leather jacket after a long day of work. And that for me is distributed PI planning. You can make it amazing, but boy, it's a lot of work. So, Niko, as author of this particular torture test, I volunteer you to go next.
By the way, it was torture for me too, because one thing is find the question and the next thing is answer it yourself. And then I realized I'm not the guy that works via the nose. So I started doing word playing, and then I said, okay, mine is distributed channel number 5. So you need many channels, orchestrated channels, to make the people, the business owner, happy. That's why channel number 5.
Oh, that's creative.
That was really, really bad. My wife,
Yeah.
my wife, who loves bad puns, really loved it.
Cool.
Microsoft Teams channel number 5.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, that's very
That
smelly.
smells like leather and blood.
Yeah, I had different thoughts going through my head when I read the jiggles, and I thought, okay, distributed PI planning. How do you attract people to join, to onboard, to collaborate, to communicate, right? And I came up with the one perfume I'm using as well, Terre from Hermes. How do you create a sensation? Why do you put on a perfume? You want to smell nice, right? You want to attract people. So a PI planning, and I was listening to you, Ali, as well. If you want to be lucky and have a good date with your people in PI planning, and if it's distributed, you have to attract them, right? And luck is only then if you have enough preparation and it meets the opportunity of PI planning. That's why I took Terre from Hermes.
But I mean, Stephan, you attract people with your charm and with your, your gravitas. There's
Guess
no
what,
perfume
Ali?
required
After a
there.
day's work, you don't smell well. You don't attract people anymore. You need some perfume.
Smelling like a well-worn leather jacket
Yes.
after that long day.
The highway to hell. No.
Yeah, Niko, I'm every time I'm just astounded by your sort of creative questions. A perfume. I mean, I was thinking about the distributed PI planning is obviously something that you do not necessarily want per se, because a face-to-face one is something that just works way better. But if there's no other option, then perhaps let's do that distributed one. So because of that, I thought which kind of perfume or fragrance or whatever would it be? I think it will be distributed PI planning will be much more of a diluted but mildly effective body spray rather than a perfume, cologne, or that kind of stuff, because it's there, you can smell it. It works, but it's not that effective for a night out.
He's going full in body spray. Wow.
Look, I'll tell you, I thought about deodorant on the way through, right? How do you make sure it's not too smelly? But
Yeah, that's what I went for.
all right, so moving back to something slightly more serious. If I think back to, my first one, the utter fiasco, the Teams and remote calls on Teams, tools like Mural, none of that existed back then. And, one of the things that was challenging for us was that there were only a certain number of rooms that had VC capability. And, when crisis hit, it was like, which rooms are possible and did we have the right booking at the right time for those rooms so that we could actually get people talking. And, there's been a huge shift. There's one thing COVID did for us, right? The acceleration of distributed collaboration tools and the way technology in the distributed world has shifted has been phenomenal. If you think about, your first experience and the journey you've been on, perhaps to, nearly 4 years later now, has technology and your ability to leverage it and the problems you can solve with it changed your experience from those first ones? Stephan, why don't you take us away?
We talked about preparation, and let me summarize that before I answer the question, how has technology changed my experience or our experience? I think it's a leadership thing, right? Leaders show up first and leaders eat last. So a lot of preparation, night shifts, you have to be prepared, and I'm fully in sync with you, Ali, right? If there's no good preparation, how can you exemplify what you ask the people to bring in for a PI planning? And we all know traditional PI planning on-site, face-to-face is already really strenuous. 2 days, you're dead flat, but you're happy, you achieved some committed PI objectives. So it's a leadership thing. And what has changed for me, not perhaps technology-wise or the amount of work, if you do that well, what has changed, and I've seen that over and over again, you have to keep alignment over those 2 days with the help of technology, with the help of communication and the right logistics. And then it requires the discipline from all attendees. And for me, it's you exemplify through the preparation how it's done. You exemplify as an RTE, as business owners, as art triad, and even as team coaches or POs, how you want it to be. So leaders are constantly leading through the distributed PI planning. And that has changed dramatically for me. And I suggest that if you are in this position that you don't need distributed PI planning, at least have a distributed one where people sit in their offices and you are not there in person to really experience what is the discipline and what is your actual culture in your train or in your trains. Because you can talk about culture if you don't have a different behavior, if you don't have this discipline, and if you are not focused for 2 days on the right stuff, you probably never experience that. So for me, distributed PI planning is really is also a good training ground. And that has changed for experience-wise.
Let's poke at one aspect of leadership, PI planning, distributed PI planning and technology, just along the way through. For me, when I think about people trying to do distributed collaboration, there's really the haves and the have-nots. The haves have a corporate mural account, and the have-nots work for organizations that think that Teams is a good place to collaborate, right? And, I've seen people be incredibly creative, using the task planner in Teams as a post-it brainstorming tool or doing shared editing of a PowerPoint document using boxes as post-its. Boy, I've seen some stuff. But, what's your experience been in terms of leaders actually taking ownership of making the investment and making the right distributed collaboration tools available for their people. Have you seen that really commonly in Europe, or?
If I may, I think people's appetite / tolerance for tools just increased. In the end,
Right.
irrespective of the type of tool, there's still some people who, their own personal traits sort of filters through, which is, I'm the loudest person in the room, which is already annoying whenever you are in a face-to-face setting, in a room together. It's even more annoying whenever everyone is dialed into the same Teams, Zoom call, or whatever call, because that's just how these tools work. They sort of isolate one audio input, which is from the person that is talking, the loudest, and then sort of takes out the rest, which basically means everyone else should remain quiet, which is just very tough. But I think we just all started to understand a little bit more on how to talk in online calls, Zoom, Discord, as we are using, or Teams, or whatever equivalent. But the technology itself didn't change that much.
Niko is bouncing out of his chair over there.
I don't know if it goes the wrong direction or the different direction, but Mark, what also is important is not only the lack of want to invest in technology, it's also stuff like we have to agree on data protection, we have to see where data is, etc. So in my case is during COVID, the long discussions were, are our data safe? And what happens? People started working in private equipment just because it wasn't possible with the equipment of the company. And now imagine what happens with data if it's on the private equipment. Some people managed, some companies managed to get the cool tools, other didn't manage. And it's not only not want to invest, it's also in Europe at least, or in Switzerland at least, the fear of what happens with my secrets, with my data, with privacy stuff. And then it's the stick with stones instead of technology.
Stephan,
Yeah, they
felt
to
like
add
get
to
a
you
lot
were-
of half-hour situations.
And to add to that one observation I made since 2020, people are more focused and more disciplined per se if you do this distributed PR planning, because you need those means. So those who talk loudest and often sometimes have to concentrate more on how to handle the tool, and that gives space for the others. And what I've heard from senior leadership and top management over and over again, that was very disciplined. It was very focused. We got a result. They didn't care about the tooling. That was our duty to prepare that. Their focus was really covered by how we ended up with committed PR objectives. And the transparency, if I need to see something in detail, then I have to deal with the means and the tools that I've got. And as you mentioned, some cultures can deal with less tools. Some other cultures, like the German engineering DNA, ask for lots of tools, and it has to be 100% accurate. That's the culture you have to perceive and that you have to bring in. And you have to abide to that. There are expectations behind it, right? From attendees, even up to the top management. Why are you doing it? And they will understand, yes, there's a significant investment around the PR planning. But that's the magic. If you want the magic to happen, you have to invest.
Well, that's so interesting, Mark, asking us for technology and we answering about culture and people. But the interesting thing on my side is it really happened that technology forced us to think about how we do communicate, how do we collaborate. So it broke the patterns, the communication patterns we had. So Ali said about the loudest now is now not so loud anymore because he or she has to struggle or to integrate themselves. They cannot get the room because you don't have a room anymore. It's a different a space you are walking. So what happens with technology on my side was it gave us the chance to reflect about how we communicate in the PI planning and also about how people communicate. So for instance, when you go in a breakout room physically, how do you get your attention? You just go nearby the group, and then you try to find your way to look to the one in the eyes who is talking, and then a natural dialogue appears. This is not possible with remote setups. So if you go to a breakout room, it happens boom, rearrangement of the squares, and then everybody stops talking. To really think about how do we do communication together, and that was really a cool experience. So technology forced us to be more human and think about how do we function and how do we communicate.
So,
Well, the
far away on it.
just to a small little addition over there. I think we found tricks to do so. That's eventually I was working with an RTE who created all types of distribution lists, sort of email or security distribution lists, how you call those things, just to be able to use Teams in a proactive way, in the sense of there is a session, just start it up, but I need all of my specific people in that session. So what do? I invite not every single person. No, I'm going to invite an entire distribution list. So this means all of a sudden 15 people or maybe 25 people will get an invite to join a call, or using a distributed timer. I'm very much of a fan of a timer, which is an open source one called chronograph.io, which is a distributed timer. There's a person that can, pause, start it, whatever. And there's a URL that you just share with whomever needs that timer, and everyone sees at the same time. So you have a distributed clock. And these small little tricks that just allow everyone to collaborate. And I like those kind of small little tricks.
Yeah, I think certainly for me, the people who've gone to the effort, let's say Teams, and let's be honest, right? Teams is the dominant interaction platform for PR plannings that I see. The people who do a lot of work on their channel configuration and actually using channel-based calls as opposed to meeting invite-based calls, and have, different channels with different memberships so that you can do cross-cutting communication effectively, and just that little stuff like that, and maybe, and if there's sort of one big central mural or mirror, and this is, I quite often see this, is there's one shared board for everybody at the PI planning, and then people often have local boards or local spaces. Just little things like put the URLs for the Teams channels on the board, so that if you're a bit lost and you want to go and talk to somebody, you're just clicking something on the board instead of hunting for it. And it's all those little kind of bits of attention to detail. But let's come back away a little bit, right? And maybe moving ourselves towards some of the downsides, or the things that can go horribly wrong. And if I go, what's the biggest pet peeve I've got about a distributed PI planning is when you walk past a room and or you drop into a room, and what you've got is the Scrum Master or the product owner has Jira open on screen, and the shared screen is a Jira ticket or an Azure DevOps ticket. And you've got this poor team who's going to spend 2 days watching their Scrum Master or their product owner type tickets into Jira, right? And, just stab me now if you want me to go and do that regularly. So if I think, and it's easy to do, right? Is people go, well, of course, we're going to have to load it in eventually. Why would we ever look at the fact that there's two-way integration with a lot of the good collaboration tools? At that point, it becomes a very mechanical thing. And it's probably the biggest thing that I'm looking for with the distributed PR planning is how do you avoid it just becoming a very mechanical exercise? Because PR planning it's got mechanics, but it's not meant to be mechanical. Niko.
Yeah, and if I go back to what I said before, because of COVID and the distributed stuff, we're starting to think about what's the main goal, what we want to achieve. So before, when people just one guy was tapping in Jira and all the others standing around, it was some kind of stiller happening. But if you're working remote and one guy is typing and the others are just waiting and don't see what this guy is doing, it feels completely strange. And then you start realizing, okay, it's not about feeding up Jira. It's about visualizing what we are doing. It's writing story-like chunks. It's finding dependencies. So it really started that you try to think about what is important for a PI planning, and it's not having now the Jira ticket, it's having it later. Now you need the communication, and distributed showed that it showed it because it was boring. Before it was a little bit like a happening. You stand around, you watch him doing mistakes, you laugh about him, and now you're completely somewhere else. So it was really difficult. And the same if you I, by the way, distinguish between, do I have a distributed PI planning with different locations, or have a distributed PI planning everybody sitting in the home office? And for let's call it satellite PI plannings, where you have satellites with people being there. What was the first thing I realized is people don't realize how much they disturb others by just talking. So if you are in a group and you have a different room, they are also in your group. You don't realize, if you're in the main location, how much you talk and have side talks. And then one of the things we tried to bring in is some kind of communication protocol. So it's really important to realize, skip the side talks, or have a better infrastructure that you don't hear the side talks. And this was an eye-opener for me when I first time voluntarily choose to go to the satellite location. Before I was always in the main location. And I thought something is wrong. They don't really talk with us. They are so quiet. And I was one time the satellite location, and I realized it's difficult to talk if you are the minority.
Yeah.
It's difficult to say something because you always think I interrupt them. And when you hear the pause and you want to say something, meanwhile, they also hear the pause longer. So they start continuous talking. So you just stay quiet because you think you interrupt them. You're some kind of passive. And then introducing protocols, what to do, asking people, are you still here? Or have you questions? And going room by room. So hey, Munich, hey, Sydney, or whatever, do you have questions? It's really an important thing. So cut off side talks, include them, invite them, ask them, is one of the things I do now. And this was one of the anti-patterns. Just ignore them somehow. It feels like being ignored.
Yeah, I can second that, Niko. It's easy to hide behind the connection and the comm technology and have your side talks, whatever. And this leads to a tendency of less global optimization. Again, have clear rules. What is the goal of day one? You want to have all the skeletons out of the cellar so you can talk about them in management review. Day two, committed set of PI objectives, right? So we had a rule, make day one as haptic as possible, even distributed and fully electronically supported, have a Miro board. Jira is not an issue, or whatever tool you're using. You have day two to do so, because if you don't have plan adaptations or have to change, you then can do that stuff after you've talked to the business owners about business relevance. What is it that we should achieve? So have clear rules. And again, as you said, Niko, Scrum Masters, team coaches, RTEs, even R-Triad, you as leaders, you enforce those rules. You ask for that and say, hey, guys, come back. We are talking about this one. And make it as transparent and as visual as possible. That's why I like a Miro board. Even if you have everything in the tool, get this representation for everyone who is participating in the PI planning, no matter what the type of distributed is.
And I think tools need to help you in that, because it's already been mentioned. Whenever you're sitting in a room all together, you have chats. You cannot really dive underneath the table and then not participate. But whenever we're all joining a Microsoft Teams call, it could be that somebody who's joining that same call, as a team breakout, is actually not there. It's logged in, yes, but the person's actually painting their bedroom door or something like that. Doing something completely different. What I do notice is that tools like Teams, they have this that little bell icon at the top left corner of the Teams window, which basically means if there is a notification in the sense of somebody has mentioned your specific name using the @, I think that there's a little bell icon over there, and we figured out that's actually pretty powerful, because
Yep.
People are, they receive a notification on their phone, they receive a notification in their application if they turn that on, of course. It works actually pretty well. So what if we create a huge list of togglers, like a toggle? So it's like a small little button. The moment that you click the button, what would happen is an automatic script would just post somewhere in a different channel. It would post the @rate name of the person that you just clicked, plus the @rate name of the person who clicked the button, which basically means the person that is requested would receive a message that Niko has pressed a button, which is it's just a small little reminder that somebody needs me. And I figured out that it increased participation so much, because no active participation is really the way to destroy your let's say the flow of this distributed PI planning. It's just making it a little bit more personal, because somebody has asked for me, they want to talk with me, and it shows up in a very annoying place with like a small little red red icon just next to the bell icon. A little dopamine shot happens all of a sudden, and I'm needed. It just participation really skyrocketed.
Perfect, cool things. It's exactly what I meant with we changed the kind of communication. So you don't just appear somewhere and I want to talk to you, and you rearrange all the rectangles. You find a way to say I need you. In my case, switching now to good patterns. In my case, we designed this in the mirror board. So you placed your icon to the board of the other people and told them, I need you, one of you, please come to my room. And then I was expecting somebody entering my breakout room. It's exactly what I mean. It's even a better example and a great example. Thank you, Ollie, for sharing.
So let's get actually mechanical for a second. Let's talk about agendas. And, if I think about, how does an agenda shift? We had guidance to say for many, many years that went, here's a distributed PI planning agenda. And then all of a sudden, the whole world is doing distributed PI planning after distributed PI planning. And, it shifts. And if I think about probably the client I've seen that's done its best and the amount of polish and iteration they put into it, it was also the client that used to get me to facilitate their management review at 7:00 in the morning, because, across the 3 time zones that they were planning in, that was the best time for all their executives. But one of the things that I saw them do was they got very focused on what are the moments of synchronization between our various time zones. They also got very focused on going, because quite often the cross-team communication is going to cross a time zone, we need to be doing more pre-planning to identify where the cross-team connections are, so that we can incorporate that into the way the agenda is going to play out and taking advantage of it. They also end up spreading it out over, at one stage, they'd spread it over 4 days. Just literally in terms of finding the rhythm that worked best for their people. What are some of and I appreciate sometimes it's a time zone question, sometimes it's just literally everybody's dialing in from their home office. But if you think about things that you often see shift in an agenda, Stephan, what stood out for you?
Yeah, what you just said, Mark, resonates big time in my head. It's those smaller joint timeframes you have. So creating the agenda for a distributed PI planning is a design task way ahead of PI planning. So find those smaller joint timeframes and then derive, is it still a 2-day, 3-day, 4-day, even 5-day PI planning, right? It depends on how many time zones. Handover time slots. Not only having the agenda, but hand over time slots to create information coherence between the different locations and the different locations and time zones. My big learning, you're not the big, we call it Zampano in EMEA. You're not the big director. You need proxy people, RTEs, architecture, business owners at different locations. And again, summarizing, in the end, you summarize this agenda with some concise working agreements. Either they're already in place, like the bell, Ali, right? I can push that and I get the respective group of people to be notified? Or for this agenda, is there something different than we did it the last time? That would be the biggest changes that I always try to anticipate, and I ask questions when it comes to preparation time. Is it in place? Are we comfortable with that?
What about you, Ali? How do you over-engineer your agendas?
I have no idea. It's I'm just going to be super frank here. It's every time it's a little bit of a challenge to figure out what works. I haven't really found the best way, but I've had a PI planning that was indeed spread over 3 days, especially for, whenever a train does a distributed PI planning for the first time. There's just, communication just takes longer. It's just more difficult. So you stretch, typically day one of the PI planning is stretched over 2 days then. Had that. I had even a situation where PI planning was stretched over 2 weeks, which was pretty tough, but you had 2 half-a-days in 1 week and 2 other half-a-days on another week. It has its good parts, it has its bad parts, because it's also nice to be done with PI planning. It's like, done with all of those alignments and potential scope changes and difficulties and blah blah. So I wish I had a couple of really good patterns, but then I'd be lying. So it's just really trying to figure out the least worst option in the context within the constraints that we have.
Yeah, and I can just second all the things. So Stephan, it's really a design, as you said before, and that's why I personally don't give advices. You have to do it this way, because they start believing me and say that's the only way you're doing it. And then as an SPCT and fellow, they believe you can, you're Jesus or whatever. You have to be right. That's why I always ask them questions. What parts you need to do together? What parts can you do asynchronously in different time zones? And it's not really that's the answer. You really have to think about it. You have to design it for yourself in a remote setup, and that's why I never give them an answer. I try at the end give many examples, but it's something you have to design yourself.
And to second that, Niko, don't copy paste, right? The discussion starts for me in the RTE course. There's one breakout session where we talk about distributed PI planning. And I tell them there is a template. Don't look at it. What is your context? What is your challenge? And now the next 10 to 15 minutes, start designing. Start coming up with a design generic template that you can adapt from each PI planning to the next one.
I think that's where the beauty lies, in the creativity of the people that are involved to create the best possible event. If taken seriously, to create the best possible event within the constraints that are existing. Whether we had a train that had teams in Vietnam, we had teams in the US, we had teams in Canada, we had teams in various places in Europe. I just imagine trying to create a coherent agenda for that. It's there's 1,000,001 constraint for every solution that you come up with. And I think it was the RTE or the CPO, I'm not really sure, or maybe an architect that came up with the idea, you know what? Draft plan review presentations can be done in sort of asynchronously, but it will be recorded. So the presentation that we typically do, a draft plan review, just got a few minutes to summarize a quarter worth of works in PI objectives, which is already really short. Let's record it. And whenever you have recordings, in Microsoft Teams, a record button that generates directly a video file in Microsoft Stream. Whenever you're in Microsoft Stream, you can download the file. And we had somebody edit the video just very roughly into smaller, short chunks of let's say, watchable material. It was put onto that same. It was inside a Microsoft Team channel. Everyone at every moment in time could see exactly what the results were from each team. Brilliant. Still required some work. Was that fantastic? In the constraints, yes, but it was still, I think that's sort of the gist of the game over here.
Let's get radical for a second and remember, hit my mute button. At this moment, it's like my dog is get very excited in the backyard, so I'm muting myself while you guys talk. If I think about when COVID forced us all to learn to do distributed, I found two groups of people who loved the fact that we had to go distributed. One of those groups of people was engineers, right? Pretty much every engineer I knew went, oh, fantastic. I can just sit and play games while I listen to people make a plan. The other group of people were the ones who went, I don't have to hire a hotel venue. I don't have to pay for catering. I don't have to pay for flights. I don't have to pay for hotel rooms. PI planning just got an awful lot cheaper, right? And I'm never going back. It's distributed forever. Now, I know I've been lucky enough to have a few clients who have gone back to in-person, but I'm curious for you guys, and I'm probably going to go straight to Niko because I suspect he's going to feel very similar to me on this, right? Is there still an argument for going back to in-person PR planning?
Yes. It's
Yes.
called trust threshold, and I told in the beginning I have an experience in pre-coaching life as a developer and being distributed in case of nearshoring, offshoring. And what I realized there, talked with many people, psychologists too, is your trust shrinks during time. And as a leader, as a manager, you need to find something that people encounter again. You can do this with remote, so you can increase trust again by special events or whatever. But at the end, human beings need personal contact to get better trust. So imagine it's so easy to write a stupid email, an angry email, and say, "Oh, Stephan, you're an idiot because that." But it's so difficult saying it face to face in remote setup, and it's much more difficult saying this on in-person setup. And by being in person, you see, okay, that's also a human being. Oh, he smiles more than I thought. Okay, he's not really the nerd than I thought he is, or she is, or whatever. And in German, you say sometimes, "Ich kann ihn nicht riechen." I don't like him, which has the word smelling in it. I cannot smell this person. I don't like him. Yeah, try to smell people through Zoom, and that's why it's important to be together. So you can do whatever you want, but you will lose trust during time if you do everything remote. And people who don't trust each other, then you have a performance issue. So just spend this money because it really helps you have a team with trust to each other. It pays back.
Okay, that's a +1. How about you, Stephan?
Yeah, it's a +1 for me. If you look at studies, best communication is a group sketching in front of a whiteboard. If you do it in person, best communication, best collaboration. If you have to do it in a distributed way, okay, that's then the option you have. But I'm still a stark defender of do it in person. And most of our clients, they do it at least once a year. They do it, and they have the investment. They fly people in. They combine it with a summer barbecue, whatever, right? You want to gather the people. Everything else is distributed. And what resonates in my head as well is when I ask Copilot what's advantages of PI planning, you need to address the needs of people. That goes back to the trust threshold, Niko. That's what we have to consider, right? And the other advantage is that how do we get better when it comes to engagement and achieving goals? So yes, in person, yes. If not, try to create this environment that really fosters the same or supports the same challenges and fosters the same advantages you should have.
Yeah, it's certainly for me, it's the social aspect and the shared identity. Because I find like even if I've had a number of clients where all their staff are in the one city, but the only time that they're actually all in the same room is at PI planning. Right? You see this team, right? And they all, in a day before COVID, they would have spent all day in the office together every day. And now most Australian companies, it's like a mandatory 2 days in the week, and everybody tries to figure out ways to pretend that they're doing 2 days a week, but you never actually get the whole team in the same room face to face. And I'm seeing a lot of people start to go, actually, there's a social element. This is the time that we actually see each other. We're together in the room as a team. We perhaps plan a team dinner. And, that's one side to me. The other side to me that I think is huge is, and, let's play geeky words, right? Gemba time. I've always felt that PR planning is Gemba time for leaders, because as they walk around and listen to the breakouts and get involved in the conversation, they're seeing the reality. They're listening to people and they're listening to their teams be creative to try and find ways through things. And it sets up a very special attitude at management review, because the leaders have got a day of Gemba time under their belt when they're getting into management review and problem solving. And I find quite easily in distributed PR planning that the leaders, they don't want to disturb breakouts. They don't want to jump into teams breakouts and disturb the call. They're not getting that Gemba time anymore. They're going, oh, these are the bits of the agenda that I'm required to sign into. So I'm a huge fan, and every client that I've had, whether it's once every 2 or 3 PR plannings, or whether it's an every PR planning, going to in person, it's been huge, whilst acknowledging the cost savings of distributed. I actually think for distributed planning, you probably come out with a better plan, but you miss all of the cultural and identity and alignment and, evolution as a team of teams. That's what suffers.
Agreed.
That would be a nice
Absolutely.
sentence to finish. It's so cool. Yeah, it's a nice summary.
But,
I don't know.
that would
I
miss the
think
just one
I've
key
just
takeaway.
yeah. If I may talk about that, just one key takeaway. That's it. I've scrapped the one that I've written down because I've heard another one. PI planning is the Gemba time for leaders. Copyright 2025 by Mark Richards. That's it. That's my takeaway. Got it.
Yeah, and mine would be care about tools, people, and collaboration. So mind the gap. It's the difference between to do it well and try to do it well. So yeah, do it. People, tools, collaboration.
And to allow Gemba time for leaders, no sweating blood, no tears of joy.
Oh, that's also a cool one.
I saw that one just now. I glanced down and saw your notes. I went, oh, that's beautiful. Now, bringing distributed PR planning to a close, it's quite exciting this week. In our new mode of, topics that are interesting or we're passionate about, we're also very open to people going, hey, can you guys do an episode on topic X? And Niko, I believe you had somebody reach out to you and send us a request, which is going to be next week.
Exactly, and we will honor it and say next week's topic is retrospectives on art level, best practices for reflection on this level. So how do you do retros on art level?
So it's more than just
Very
inspect
cool.
and adapt, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if
For
you're
sure.
interested in that, folks, join us next week. Otherwise, thanks for being there, being present. If you're still here, thanks for sticking with us. It's been fun for us, and we've had lots of fun laughing at each other as we go through. And we are done for distributed PR planning.